For authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everybody. This is Roy. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Tamarack Song. And we're going to be talking about his book, Entering the Mind of the Tracker. But before we go into that, if y'all want to learn more about him, he has a website at www.tamaracksong.org and another one at www.teachingdrum.org. And that will have links to his other material and everything you might want to learn about him and get to know him better with. I want to remind everybody that Talk Now Radio is listener supported. So if you want to keep the sponsors out, show your support, purchase books through the links underneath the descriptions, hit the Google ads at the top, use the donation meter, whatever, you keep us on the air and keep us from having our, shows, I guess you might call it censored, in other words, folks. So whatever you can do to help, keep us on the air, we'll keep on going. Tamarack, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Royce, and I'm glad to be here. I so much enjoy talking about this sort of thing. It's spreading the word about nature and the wonders that are just hidden just under the surface that are there for us to discover. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
I am too. I'm looking forward to learning some stuff here. Real quick, want to let everybody know, though, the call-in number is 832-632-7904. And if you don't feel like calling in, feel free to ask your questions in the chat room. So, Tamarack, I was telling you earlier when I first called you that this here's a new topic to me. So I thought you might want to tell everybody what got you involved in writing about this particular topic.
Well, it has to do with the condition of modern man. You might say this is a bit of a simplification, but what it boils down to is that what I see that we've done is we've built up a wall, we've created a boundary between us and nature, and that boundary is rather seamless. Actually, it's a transparent boundary because we are nature. Nature is our nature. We cannot escape from it. We breathe the air. We need the water. The trees give us our oxygen. Everything is nature, even though we say that we live in a civilized environment, and nature is out there somewhere, out beyond the city walls, or out in the park, or in the wilderness, or the national forests, or whatever. But that's not the case. And my mission in life is to help bring that awareness back to our civilized society. And even though we may be leading quite regular lives, if we're aware of this, we might do things a little bit differently. We might buy a little smaller car next time, or buy green and start eating organic rather than supporting chemicalizing the fields and all the plants and animals that kills. It's just basically a matter of awareness, and that's why I wrote the book, and that's my mission in life.
Okay. Well, I was just sitting there listening to you talk about the wilderness out there, and it really kind of slammed home in my mind how many times I've actually heard teachers, parents, preachers, Sunday school teachers, all kinds of people that would actually drive that point home. I mean, to people living inside the city, the nature is out in the woods. Most people, they view themselves as trapped inside of a concrete jungle, but while I was listening to you, the thought also occurred to me, you can't really be trapped fully 100% inside of a concrete jungle without getting rid of all the dogs, the cats, the birds, the trees, the flowers.
Yeah.
It's still intermixed. It's not 100%, in other words, ain't it?
It is truly. And, I teach classes in nature awareness and how to reawaken our senses. They're very deadened, very dulled. 85% of what we do is sight-oriented. But actually sound is much more important than sight in nature. And there's still all of this going on all around us, even in in the concrete jungle, there are pigeons and sparrows, and as you said, there are flowers and there are still trees, even though there might just be a few ornamental trees. There is life there, and we can attune to that. We can notice that. We can recognize that. In fact, I read about this woman who is everyone knows her just as kind of a regular housewife in the city, in an urban area. However, she is the world expert on house sparrows because she watches the sparrows in her backyard. She knows all about their mating habits and their songs, their communication, their reproductive cycle. She learned all that in her backyard in the city. So it's there.
So she's got a real strong interest in birds, sparrows to be precise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If we learn something about one thing in nature, we learn something about all things, because the same motivations, the same needs, the same desires are shared by all animals. So what you learn about one bird, you know about all birds pretty much.
You know, that's a very good point, because everybody, you, me, even fresh-born babies, at their most basic instinct level, is survival.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we share that with every animal, every part of creation that has any kind of sentience whatsoever. Everybody knows what survival is.
That's a good point. It's a real good point, because what are we all about? We're about surviving and reproducing, and we have to survive in order to reproduce, and we have to reproduce in
reproducing
order to
is
survive.
about surviving in your generations too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, mm-hmm. That's what it all boils down to. So our discussion right now is about survival.
That kind of makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? Why is the survival instinct so predominant, and why does it occupy so much thought life and everywhere you go, do you think?
Boy, I think about that in relation to our state as civilized humans. We don't think of ourselves as being in survival mode because we're so protected. We don't have, we're protected largely from the weather. We are protected from the day-to-day hunt, going out and hunting animals who could be dangerous. And we live a very, very sheltered existence. However, it's still all about survival, and we're designed as survival creatures. We love stress challenge. If we don't get it, we create it. We go out, we want adventure and excitement and intrigue and mystery, so we watch movies and videos that give it to us. Some of us go out canoeing and skydiving or circuses and fairs and carnivals. There are rides that get our adrenaline pumping, and we go skiing and all kinds of things that give us that rush that we would get on the hunt.
That's kind of a hard to grasp concept if you look at it up front, at least to somebody like me. I mean, you're so worried about survival. You spend such a basic instinct and a need, but yet you turn right around and threaten that survival for your entertainment.
That's right, exactly. We're wired for it. Like you said, even a baby is wired for survival, and that's exactly it. And we don't feel good unless we have some challenge in our lives. And if it's not naturally there, we create it. It's just amazing.
Yeah, from little babies about to fall off the edge of the bed or the stairs to big grown-ups driving 90 miles an hour on an on-ramp and cutting 4 lanes of traffic without looking.
You got it. It's crazy, but that's what we do. Exactly.
I had to throw that one in there because I actually did that one on a dare once.
Oh, boy.
My brother-in-law Jerry never dared me again.
Yeah, good thing.
But you can see why. But you, Tamarack, you live in the wilds, don't you? Or you live on a reservation?
I live in the National Forest, in the Nicolet National Forest up in northern Wisconsin.
So you're not even on a reservation. You're actually in the actual middle of the wild.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you live in a lean-to or a teepee or...
I have one. I don't spend much time there lately, though, because I spend about 2/3 of my time writing and about 1/3 of my time teaching. So I'm looking out the window right now. I'm looking into the forest. So I'm in the forest. However, I am not in a primitive shelter in the forest.
So your cost of living is very, very extremely low.
Extremely low, yes. I heat 100% with wood, gather all my own meat, fish, all my own nuts, most of my own greens. I do a lot of foraging.
So you would be an excellent person to learn tracking from because you do it as a way of sustenance.
I do, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a way of life. And we talked about being wired for survival. Tracking is a part of the survival skill that's wired in. And the funny thing, Royce, is that we all track. We track all day. To get across town, we're using tracking skills. To keep track of our kids, if we have kids. Finding that set of keys that we set somewhere, we're backtracking ourselves to see where they went. We're always using our tracking skills in some way. And so what I do isn't really all that special. We all like to think we're doing something special, but, I'm just doing what anybody could do. It's just getting used to a new environment. You have to be in the woods for a while in order to get used to it, just like a country boy needs to sit in the city for a while to get used to it, and then you start functioning all right. It's the same thing in the woods.
Well, I had to go through survival training in the Marine Corps, and I sometimes don't think a lot of people would that I live with here in the city would take to learning how to survive out in the wild without some kind of training.
Yeah, well, necessity is the mother of invention. If we have, I teach survival courses in the classes we do, and if they think they're coming and they're gonna learn some survival skills and stay here for a week or so and go back home, they don't really apply themselves because they know they're going to have a hot shower at the end of the week. What we need to do in order for them to really get into it is to take away their water bottles, take away their matches, take away their prepackaged food. They all try to sneak some in, and then stick them out in the woods. And now it's do or die. They know they have to get it together. Take away their tarps. We don't even in our year-long course, they don't even get tents. They have to build shelters, and now they start to perform. We have tremendous capacities. We've just pampered ourselves for so long that we don't realize what we're made of and what we're capable of. And I bet you learned that in the Marines too.
Yeah, there is a lot of truth to that, and a lot of people, they just don't want to learn. But again, some of those, even then, when they're put in a do-or-die situation, they don't like it, but they do it anyway.
True. So true.
But say, take it then that you have a big success ratio with your classes.
Well, we have about a 30% dropout rate in the year-long course, and that is, I consider that a tremendous success rate because even in the freshman year of college, there's a 30% dropout rate. You consider that a pretty easy existence. But it's pretty standard for anything where you immerse yourself in another culture. The Peace Corps, the military, even people going to spend a year in an ashram in India have roughly a 30% dropout rate. So we're right in there.
Okay. I'll tell you what, I think there's a lot of people in the city that could probably make use of something like that. I don't know if you get a lot of time to check out the news on TV or Facebook pages or other sources of material that people come across on a daily basis, coming in from most of your conspiracy theorists about how the GMOs are poisoning our food and they got fluoride in the water and I mean, all the big doomsday material out there. The thing about it is, most of that material is true. That is the situation. But, if you knew how to live out in the wild, you could just go out there and live and get away from the whole shooting match.
Pretty much. At least today. I don't know about tomorrow. If we're going to have a nuclear winter, it's going to affect everything and everybody, no matter where you are. There aren't any artificial boundaries, The 100 years ago and 200 years ago, we had a frontier where you could go and you didn't have to worry about anything. But now, acid rain is hitting everywhere. There are some lakes way up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York that have no fish left in them anymore because of acid rain. And Greenland, they're testing the water up in Greenland, of all places. It's way off in the Arctic. And the DDT they're finding and the plastic molecular particles and all the various things from the breakdown of our waste is ending up everywhere. The ocean currents go everywhere, the air goes everywhere, so there's really no escaping it anymore. Even though, what you say I agree with in general. I can go in the woods and I can survive. If our society were to collapse, I would go out and I would do fine. I would take my people with me, and we would do fine. However, we're all in this boat together, and my real approach is that we're either all going to sink or swim together. Otherwise, I'd be out there right now living happily in the woods, but I know I can't do that forever if everyone else is going down. It's going to get me too.
I know that there's been reports of fish dying in certain areas that some have suspected was related to these acid rains you speak of. But isn't there a means of purifying that water so that it won't make you sick? Like boiling it over a campfire, for example, and straining it?
Yeah, the acidity isn't so bad that you're not able to drink it. Our bodies can handle that pretty well, and there are ways to filter water also to get rid of a lot of contaminants. Some of them are so tiny, though, that a natural filter just isn't going to take it all out. But there are other ways, like evaporation and collecting dew, where the water is already, it's naturally steam filtered, you might say. So there are ways that you can get clean drinking water. That's not too bad. It's the air that's the problem. The air goes everywhere, and if we get some major contaminants in the air, it could be a real problem.
Well, I'm kind of personally holding out for the belief that, or the hope, should I say, that now that they got all this biological warfare and these drones and other sources, they'll choose not to contaminate the world with nukes so that they can get their own use out of it later.
Yeah. I'm with you there. I hope everyone has enough sense to see it that way.
I mean, why destroy everything if you got another means?
Yep.
Then you can't use it. I mean, I know people haven't shown a lot of intelligence up in office, but surely they can show that much.
Boy, I hope you're right, Royce. I really do.
So do I.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense, and that's probably the case. It's probably the scenario that's going to play out.
Well, can you tell my listeners a little something about this great hoop you were telling me about earlier that's in your book?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? I didn't catch that.
The great hoop. Can you tell everybody what the great hoop is?
Oh, yeah. We were talking earlier about the hoop of life, or the circle of life that I learned from the native elders. I live in an area that has quite a bit of reservations. We've got mostly Ojibwe people around, and Menominee people also. And boy, ever since I was 6 or 8 years of age, I've been meeting elders and spending time with them. And what they talk about is that it's all about relationship. Any situation you have, anything you do is relationship based, and they talk about these relationship skills that we need to know in order to function in the hoop of life. And what they call the hoop of life is all of life, all the plants and the animals and what we consider the non-living entities, the rocks and the soil and the water. They see all of that being living and having spirit. And it's all working together in this synchronous whole, like a great spider web, all connected. And when we live with honor and respect, we see ourselves as a part of that hoop of life, not as separated from it, or not as being special or above it, in control of it, because we are not. We're going to die, and we're going to return right back from whence we came. It doesn't matter what we do, what we think, what we believe. We're going to die and go back to the earth, and we're going to become the trees again and the animals, and that's just the way it is. That's the hoop of life. So I've learned a lot of humility and a lot of respect from the native elders, especially when I was in my 20s. As with a lot of people, we think we got it all figured out, and we're on top of the world, and we're going to do this and that with our lives, and, we've got it figured out, and these other people, they're wrong. If everyone would just do it my way.
Everyone else is always wrong.
That's right. Well, you get humbled after a while, because you find out that some of the tracks you're taking end up to be dead ends and worse, and you get knocked around a little bit. And some people get bitter because of it, and some people turn to drugs and other diversions, and some people just give up and become couch potatoes, and some of us don't. Some of us learn. I was just fortunate to have Native elders guiding me in my younger days, and they let me go out and make my mistakes. You got to make them. They don't call them mistakes, actually. They call them teachings. And one example they gave me is of a baby. When a baby starts getting up and starts walking, that baby has to trip and fall in order to learn how to walk, because if it didn't happen, if mom kept holding that baby's hand, that baby's not going to know what to do when that baby comes across something where she actually does trip and fall. She's going to lay there and cry and wait for mama to pick her up, instead of learning to be strong, to be self-reliant, and learning what to do to help take care of herself and thereby take care of other people. And that's what the natives taught me, that giving is receiving. When we take care of ourselves and when we learn these skills, it's not just for us, it's for passing on to others so that we can help them in turn, and it keeps going that way.
Except over here in America somewhere, the teaching didn't seem to get passed down, or it didn't take if it did.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, I say in America, of course you're in America too, but I mean in the cities.
Yeah. We've got it backwards, I think. The elders told me that giving is receiving, and we do it in the reverse. We're so I-oriented, It's the I, me, mine culture. We're all about self-development and assertiveness and getting your own nest egg together and taking care of yourself and your little isolated nuclear family, and to hell with everybody else, basically. It's all based on competition. Yeah, we smile to each other, but what do we really want? We want to keep up with the Joneses. We want to have a big bank account. We want to have our vacation home and our SUV, and on and on and on. And where's that coming from? It's not manufactured out of blue air. It's got to come from somewhere. And the more we have, the less someone else has. There's only so much to go around.
Well, I got to ask you, do you ever miss having things like TVs and stereos and computers as a rule?
Well, I have a computer. I write on a computer, and I just see it as a tool. If the computer disappeared tomorrow, I would be just fine with it. I drive a car. I don't own a car. I don't own anything. Even the computer I'm using, I don't own, really. It belongs to the school here. But I see them as tools, and I would rather not have highways all over the place. I would rather that we get back to something more sustainable. Bicycles would be okay. I'd rather canoe. I'd rather paddle. However, if I'm going to a workshop somewhere, it would take me a long time to paddle there. So it's a give and take. I don't see it really as a compromise, but just using the tools at hand. I don't necessarily believe in the tools. I'm not married to the tools. And as I said, if they disappeared tomorrow, I would be all the happier.
Yeah, I think in many ways it could be a benefit, but I also tend to think maybe in some ways it's been beneficial as well. I mean, like we're here in America in contact with people over there in Europe, and back in yesteryear, before communication in cars and planes, that was not an everyday occurrence.
Yeah, right.
Which, of course, that's great for sales-oriented people, but I guess it's not really a necessary given for people just living their day-to-day lives.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it right. There are two sides to it, If we were living more simply, it wouldn't be necessary to be in contact with people from Europe and Asia and Africa. However, now, if we're not in contact, if we're not coordinating what we're doing, we could really get in trouble with the allocation of resources, with world political situation. We really need communication right now. We have to listen to each other. We have to learn how to cooperate. We just cannot afford another world war. The tremendous famine in some parts of the world, it weighs heavily on our conscience, and partly because we helped to cause it. I think communication in that sense is good. It's good that we stay in touch with what's going on. but I think it's really a Band-Aid approach, because the situation is the way it is because of the way we're living. If we were living more closer to the earth, if we were living honorably and respectfully again, we wouldn't have these kinds of situations that we have to stay on top of.
Wouldn't have to worry about Europe coming over and doing what they're going to do or something. Yeah, because,
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, if we had a big solar storm tomorrow, knock out all the electricity in the world, this whole world would go goofball or something.
Oh, it would be a horrific mess. Horrific. Well, I've run some scenarios by. If we ran out of power, 95% of our urban population would die. That's my estimate. It just doesn't look pretty. We are so
That don't sound very
right
pretty.
now. No,
And so
yeah.
few people. I mean, if you didn't want to live in the wild, people today could get their own gardens. They could get their own wells and solar panels, and they could become more independent this way. But most people don't even want to do that, even though tomorrow they may have to do that or not live.
Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, and there again, if we have a little forewarning, necessity is the mother of invention. We have these tremendous capacities. We've done it in the past. We had victory gardens in World War II. We could pull it together. Will there be the time for that? I don't know. Things happen so fast now, World Wars I and II evolved kind of slowly, and we're 2 years before we got involved in World War II. And it was actually Europe that did most of the fighting there. We just came in on the tail end, actually. We got a lot of credit because we helped to tip the tide, of course, but it was really toward the end of the war. It may not happen the next time. Things are happening so instantaneously now.
Right.
So we may not be ready.
Getting back to your book, I have a bad habit of straying. I hope you can forgive me for that.
Oh, I don't mind. This is all fun stuff for me. It's all very important and interesting stuff.
Tell us a little something that you would like to have the listeners know about your book that that you think will be of interest to them.
Oh boy, where to start? I think
At the beginning. No.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think an important aspect of what I bring out in the book is how we learn through conflict. We're afraid of conflict, and we avoid it oftentimes. However, we learn best when we're stressed. We mentioned that a little bit already. And out in nature, there's this dynamic tension going on all the time between prey and predator. An example I like to use and that I mention in the book is that wolves, when they're hunting buffalo or hunting caribou, the buffalo and the caribou know it. They will panic. They'll run. However, when the wolves are not hunting, the prey animals can read the body language, and they're just relaxed. And sometimes you will see the wolves just meandering through a herd of caribou, and the caribou are there grazing peacefully, and the wolves are just walking through. And you'd think they'd be sworn enemies, right? But not when the wolves aren't hungry. Everything is just fine. It's only when they hunt, and then the trigger's on. And that trigger is really important, and there the conflict is needed, because if it wasn't, the wolves would be right there, and they could just grab any caribou right there. But the caribou get wind of the wolves getting hungry, and they start getting nervous, and they start moving. And the wolves are watching, and what they're watching for is the weak caribou, because the caribou need the wolves, and the wolves need the caribou. The sick ones, the ones that are diseased, are the ones that the caribou actually want to have weeded out of the herd, because they will spread disease in the herd. They're full of parasites, for example. They're not doing the herd any good. It's about the herd rather than the individual. So the herd will start moving, and then the wolves start chasing them, and the herd picks up speed. And the wolves are watching for the weak caribou, the ones falling behind, or the ones that aren't keeping a good rhythm on the run. And they forget about the rest of the herd. The herd runs off, and they single out these sick ones, these weak ones, or the old ones. The old ones that aren't going to make it through the winter anyway, the old ones that are holding the rest of the herd back. And that's what they end up killing and eating. and they're actually doing the herd a favor, so they need each other. And it's this dynamic tension between the two that keeps the wolves healthy and keeps the caribou healthy. So here's where we do the best. We learn through conflict. We learn through this dynamic tension. And I bring that out throughout the book. And it's not this bloodthirsty, killing that I talk about. I talk about taking people out into nature and teaching them tracking and learning bird language and learning about the silent communication that's going on. And we're noticing things, and we're tracking wolves and doing various things in the woods. And it's not about the law of the jungle at all. That a wolf eats and it's done, and a wolf lays around with a full belly and contented for a couple of days before going out to kill again. So there's really a lot of serenity and contentment in nature, even though there's this dynamic tension all the time. Otherwise, these animals would be stressed out all the time. And you see wild animals, and they're actually pretty relaxed. It's only in the chase that you see this play out of the killer and the killed. And I think we can learn so much from that about how nature functions and how we can function, how we don't have to be in this state of stress all the time, and how nation doesn't have to be a fighting nation all the time. If we can just get back to this natural way of being.
I was just wondering, what's the odds of you catching a wolf while their belly is full and making friends with them?
Well, I spent several years of my early adulthood with a pack of wolves. They were a semi-domestic pack of wolves, and they're the most social animals you can imagine. We have this image of the bloodthirsty wolf, the stories of Little Red Riding Hood, etc. And those are just myths. It just doesn't exist. They are just kind and gentle, and I would when I went in to join the pack, they'd come up to me and they'd be licking my face. I mean, they're just great big overgrown puppies. They'd push me over and they'd be licking me all over the place, and anything but bloodthirsty. It's anything but that. Watching them raise their pups is so kind. It's so touching, because it's not only the biological parents, but the unmated animals too. They act as aunts and uncles, and bringing food back for the pups and babysitting them. It's a very, very social, benevolent organization in the pack.
Okay. So they're really closer to being dogs than they are wolves. Well, they're really from the same family, aren't they?
Yeah, dogs are actually domesticated wolves. Dogs have 100% wolf genetics, believe it or not. It's hard to tell if you have a little toy poodle in your hand, that this is a wolf, but genetically that poodle is a wolf. Yeah,
we
crazy.
just tamed them and called them dogs.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. What we've done with dogs is actually to dumb them down. Dogs have smaller brain cases than wolves, about 30% smaller. And that has to be because the more intelligent an animal is, the harder it is to train the animal. Monkeys are terribly hard to train because they're so intelligent. We see them as being so mischievous, They want to get into things. They're curious. They're bright. Very hard to train. So the dumber the animal, the easier the animal is to train. So, we say sometimes, well, that's an intelligent dog. Well, because, look, he can do these tricks and this and this and that, and he sits there because he's trained to sit. I went over to a trapper one day, and he had these 3 hounds he hunted with. And he showed me, he sat the dog down, and he put a dog biscuit, a dog treat, on the dog's nose. And the dog sat there for the whole hour with the dog biscuit on her nose and would not move for the whole hour. That dog was that well trained. And that's a dumb dog. Seriously, it's sad but true. Now, what makes dogs seem intelligent is that we've made partial wolves out of them. For example, bloodhounds. We've really exaggerated their sense of smell so that they're very good at smelling. I mean, they're good, great scent trackers, but they have poor eyesight, and their hearing isn't that good. So, we've exaggerated one sense at the diminishment of the others. Greyhounds, great runners. They can outrun a wolf. That not stamina-wise, but speed-wise they can. However, they wouldn't be able to survive in the wilds. They're just so out of proportion. They just wouldn't fit in with a wolf pack anymore. They couldn't hunt decently. And on with our dog breeds. So it looks like they're intelligent, but that's only because they're very specialized.
Well, I don't want to miss a chance to talk to you about this aspect of tracking, because I don't think it gets covered very often, but from what I have read about Native Americans, and bearing in mind I'm part Cherokee, part Choctaw, but haven't spent no time on the reservation, but I've read and heard tell that some Indians have actually got the ability, or actually regular folks, or just anybody that makes themselves opened up to it, to actually use their intuition and their gut instinct as part of their tracking devices.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's really the core of the book, and we'd probably be getting to it anyway, but I'm glad you just cut right to it.
Well, I was afraid we'd get to talking and I'd pass it. So
yeah, good. Good for you. Thanks. I'm glad. The foreword to my book is written by a member of the Shadow Wolves, and they're the elite Indian trackers who work on the Mexican border to grab the smugglers who are coming through. And they use a combination of these old intuitive tracking skills and modern technology. And the only people who can become a part of the Shadow Wolves tracking teams are American Indians. And they're bringing these ancient skills that are passed down to their people, and they're using it for a very contemporary situation, nabbing smugglers over the border. And it's just amazing, and with what I've learned about the Indian way of tracking, and that is that, we learn technical tracking basically. I've gone to some tracking workshops, and some people come here who've gone to other workshops where you learn technical tracking, which is essentially learning, memorizing the paw prints, being able to identify a wolf track, for example, and know the difference between a wolf track and a dog track by the placement of the toes and the shape of the palm pad and the push-ups and the stride and the straddle and all these technical terms, and they can be important at times. However, if we are studying the track, if we're trailing an animal, it really slows us up because you got to look at all these details. And what the Indians do is just go by instinct, just picking up what I call the song of the track. It's the bigger cues that you pick up. You don't have to look at the track of an animal if you know where the animal is going, if you know the animal's needs and yearnings and motivations, what the animal is after. You just go where the animal's going. You take the shortcuts, and you're using.
You'll be sitting there waiting for him when he gets there.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. That's it. And you can call it instinct, you can call it intuition, call it whatever you want. But some people call it a sixth sense, but it's really just our finely attuned five senses and our knowledge. We have such tremendous intellectual capacities that we don't use. And we have this old mammalian brain also that is not our rational brain. It's our deeper brain. It's our feeling, our sensing brain. And when we engage that, when we actually have to quit talking in order to do that, because our talking right now is coming from our frontal lobes, and when we're talking, it oftentimes cuts off our deeper intelligence, our animal intelligence, and
by commanding our attention.
Yeah, exactly. So once we tune into that, now we're on the same wavelength as the animals, and we can move just as rapidly and quickly and silently, moving like a shadow, just like the other animals out there. And then it gets fun. Boy, there's so much that's possible. And this is actually what the stories in my book are all about. I'm taking people out in the woods, people who don't have the experience, and I'm showing them how to do this, how to awaken their senses, how to learn the silent language that's being spoken all the time, and how to move like a shadow, to move without being seen or heard.
Now, isn't that kind of difficult to do amongst a bunch of dry leaves?
Not really. If we go just plodding through the way we walk down the sidewalk, yes, it's very difficult. What we do in training here is, in the classes I run, is that you see, in the autumn, all the leaves are down on the ground. Well, there are certain places where you can step where the leaves are not near as crunchy. Or you wait till the wind's blowing, when the leaves are rattling up in the trees, and that's when you move. And when the wind is still, you step back a little bit. So you're actually in movement within the greater movement. Everything's moving all the time. It's just how it moves as to whether you're going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Kind of like sound blending.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just like that. So once you get attuned to the hoop of life, you move within that greater rhythm. It's like a spider web. If you touch one point in the web, all of it moves. You're not just moving that one web, that one strand. If you did, it would stick out. But when the whole web is moving for this and this and that reason, you just kind of blend in. And it works very well. It's amazing as to what people can do just spending a week in the woods. If you just go and instead of talking and going there thinking you know something, just recognize that you're a babe in the woods and you're there to listen, you're there to learn. And then you start picking up on these rhythms, these natural rhythms, and you start moving with them. And it just happens naturally. It's so beautiful to watch people. It's like a blossoming. I almost get tears in my eyes sometimes when people come and I see them bumbling around and stumbling. And at the end of a week, they're just moving so gracefully. It's like they're doing a woods ballet or something, It happens. It happens to people. We just have it in us.
Yeah, I used to always tell my kids if I took them camping that when you're out about in the woods, the only thing you might want to look for is anything that looks out of place, something that doesn't blend in with everything else, because there's usually a reason why something ain't blending in.
Yep, that's a good point.
Or something that's not in harmony, as you might want to look at it. I mean, even in the concrete jungle, as they call it, when things are not in harmony, there's usually a reason why it's not. Even if it's just a nagging feeling that something's not right, there's usually a clue that something's not right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so right. That reminds me of a scene, what was the name of the movie? Men in Black? Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah, I saw all the Men in Black.
Yeah, okay. You remember Will, the star character, he was being tested, and there were a bunch of other people there.
Oh, I know this part. It's one of my favorite parts. He shoots up the little girl.
Exactly, because she was out of place in the ghetto, She didn't fit.
Why did you think the little girl needed to be shot?
Exactly. That's exactly what you're talking about. And that's the same way in the woods, something that sticks out. Now you think rationally, well, that doesn't make sense. I can't shoot a little girl. But, there's something suspicious there, Of
course, that was something that most people wouldn't consider suspicious.
No.
But, if you actually stopped and thought about it, that is a little suspicious for a girl that age to have that kind of schoolwork.
Yeah, the whole setup, yeah. There's where you're reacting intuitively, You're picking up on something intuitively and you're responding instinctively. You're not going to have a smiling little girl in the middle of the night carrying that kind of stuff in the middle of the ghetto. Something's up. That is not a smiling little girl. And in this case, of course, they were hunting aliens and such. So that was probably an alien in disguise.
Right. Now, what about bears? Do you run into those very often out there?
Sure do. We've got bears coming up our driveway sometimes. There are bears here, and I've got an appendix in the back of the book to help people to feel comfortable in bear country and also in cougar country too, because both of them can be potentially dangerous. The incidence is very rare, though. For all the bears around, 40% of the lower United States has bear populations. Actually, they're pretty wide-ranging even in this modern day. And there are bears around, but they want to be left to themselves. themselves. If they're not being threatened, and by the way, threatening a bear is not getting between, that is a black bear, grizzly bears are different, but threatening a black bear is not getting between her and her cubs, because she'll bluff you, she'll rush you, she'll bluff you by standing on her hind legs and woofing and making a tremendous racket, and she will charge you, but she'll turn right at the end because she's not going to imperil herself. She has to be there to take care of her cubs. So that's an old wives' tale. That's not something you have to worry about. However, bears are predators, and a hungry bear, especially an old bear or a bear when there's not a very good berry season, and they're hungry, they have to fatten up for the winter, they will hunt humans and they will kill humans. So the rule of thumb is that when a bear is loud and visible, you don't have to worry. When you see a bear sneaking around and being stealthy, then you worry because they're in hunting mode.
But couldn't you go out and leave food for bears in areas away from camp to tempt them to go eat away from you so that you wouldn't have to worry as much about that?
You could, but bears get acclimated pretty quickly to humans. If you're feeding them and you're feeding them human food, they're going to keep looking for human food and they're going to keep coming around. Bears have a sense of smell that is 7 times better than a dog's, if you can believe that. And, if you're putting food out for them, they're associating human smell with that food. And they're going to, if you quit putting the food out, they're going to start sniffing down humans looking for more food. So I highly recommend against it. In fact, I recommend against feeding any wildlife for a variety of reasons. But that's my reason for bears. Don't feed bears. In the short run, it helps, yes. In the long run, though, you're creating a problem.
So what if they come looking for you and there is no food around nowhere else? What do you do, just go hide somewhere?
Well, one thing you don't want to do is lay down and play dead. That's another old wives' tale. Because if a bear is truly hungry and is looking for something to eat, boy, there's a dead animal.
Roadkill is fine with a bear.
You got it. And you're roadkill for a bear. They don't distinguish between humans and other. A dead deer and a dead human. It's all meat. They don't see humans as being any more or less sacred.
It doesn't have to be Popeyes or the Colonel's Hearts. It's just fine.
That's right. That's right. So you don't want to do that. You want to do the opposite, actually. The taller you can stand and the more noise you can make, the more threatening you are. Pick up stones, throw them at the bear, swing sticks, or do anything you need to do. You want to look bigger and meaner and badder than that bear to convince that bear that you're not worth messing with. Scream, shout, holler. Don't try climbing a tree. Black bears are great tree climbers. It's not going to work.
So basically, bears don't really know how strong and powerful they really are, and they, in their own minds, they think you might be stronger because you're maybe taller or something?
Yes, exactly. Because you're taller, you're making more racket. You're more aggressive. They don't want to fight if they don't have to. Most predators will go for the easy meal.
That sounds like, muggers here in the city.
Yeah, same thing. Well, there you go. It's that predatory instinct, It's sad that it comes out in muggers, but that's what they're doing. They're preying upon,
there's sort of like a concrete jungle tracking that you can do as well, that you apply to other humans like muggers and other criminals, and the way you carry yourself that keeps you safe, just like you do it differently in the jungle for the animals.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, when I'll go walking out through 3rd Ward or 5th Ward, I make it a habit not to come off as a bad dude looking for trouble, but not to come off as afraid and, about to run for cover at the least little boo. And I make sure that anybody out there sees me, look at them, get them a friendly, courteous nod, or especially anybody I'm suspicious of. But even if I'm not, just kind of like says, look, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. I've already ID'd you. I know who you are. Everybody's happy. Find somebody else. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's it. That's just what the wolves do with the caribou. A caribou doesn't want to look weak in front of a wolf, or a caribou's going to be the wolf's next lunch. And that's what the wolves watch for, and That's what any predator watches for. Muggers in the city, they look for the weak ones. If you're looking strong and you're not a threat, if a threat comes along to a pack of wolves, they're going to respond to the threat just as well as they're going to respond to a weak animal.
That's why I said make sure you're not a threat, but make sure you're not a easy target either.
You
Middle
got it.
ground, the balance.
Yeah. So that just goes to show. It shows how much we are a part of the natural realm. We're living by natural rules, natural guidelines, even though we're in the city. Same thing.
Well, yeah, but you was also talking earlier about that silent body language, and we're applying it to both city and in the wild both.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed when you walk into a room, let's say you're invited to a party and you don't know the people there. You walk in, and there's a lot of people are in little enclaves, talking to themselves, and you're not picking up on what they're talking about, but you're reading these people. You're looking at their body language, which you mentioned before. You're also doing more than that. You're looking at the pack structure, you might say. You're looking at who's the dominant person there, who's commanding the most attention. Are these people happy or sad? You're looking at their gestures.
Do they look like they're suspicious of you?
Yeah.
Do they look like they're fed up with you? Do they look like they're looking to rob anybody that comes along blindly? Or there's lots of things that you can pick up from them.
Yeah, the clothing, the hairstyle, the way they smell sometimes. Boy, is that person drunk? Has that person been drinking? That's a big clue. If you're hitchhiking, for example, it's the first thing you want to do. You want to get a whiff of what's going on in that vehicle. Is that person stoned or drunk? These are all kinds of clues we're picking up, and this is what I call the song of the track. It's all these clues we're picking up around us that have nothing to do with what the person is actually saying, or not directly anyway.
Well, yeah, but when you're out in the wild, they can't directly say anything to you. So what else do you have to go by?
Yeah, that's true. That's so true.
But yeah, and when it comes to drunks, they have that element of unpredictability that nobody likes to have to contend with.
You got it. You bet.
I mean, one minute they're happy, they're laughing, and the next minute they got a knife and they're heading for you, and you wonder, what did you do?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when you really did nothing, they just their mind just tripped.
Yeah, and who knows why? Yeah.
Well, I showed we got 8 minutes remaining, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, by the way. I didn't know you were seeking to speak again. But I was going to say, do you have any last-minute thoughts you want to throw in there?
Boy, let's see. I think there's one thing I'd like to bring up, and that is invisibility. And this is really important. We think of things as being visible and invisible. We think of things as being black or white. That's the way we function in this culture. We're either poor or rich. We either have the haves or the have-nots, and right on down the line. And we are so sight-oriented that we see what is visible and what's invisible. And what's visible we believe in, and what's invisible we don't believe in. And this is probably, I don't know if this is going to be the last word. We have a few minutes yet, and hopefully we can get to a couple other things yet too. But this is so important that most of what's going on is actually invisible, at least invisible to us. And if we can recognize that, we live by what I call being as a question. That's what the native elders told me. Don't look for answers, because as soon as you have an answer, you better keep looking, because there's always another question on the other side of it, because there's no cat's meow, there's no final conclusion. Everything is a process. Everything is movement. I use the term continuum. There's never any real goal or real end, but it's always this continuum that's going. And that keeps me going, so that the more I learn, the more I discover about nature, the more I realize there is to discover. There's so much more that's invisible to me. It's not really invisible. It's there, but I'm just not in touch with it yet. So if I stay open to that, I keep growing. I keep realizing that there's more that's going on. For example, I'll give an example. Let's say I'm cutting over a hill, and I come to the top of the hill, and I see a deer down there in the valley, in the next valley, and I say, "Oh boy, there's a deer." Well, if I'm stuck on that, there's only one deer as far as I'm concerned. However, with the knowledge I have, I know that, that's a doe. Let's see, and this is midsummer. A doe in midsummer is going to have probably 1 or 2 fawns right now. And so I ought to look around, because that doe didn't see me, but maybe one of the fawns saw me and is going to alert the doe if I'm hunting, for example. So you see where I'm going with this. It's always being as a question. The deer is not just a deer, but the deer is part of a family. And the deer may not see me. However, the red squirrels in the pine tree over there may have seen me, and they're starting to raise a ruckus. And the red squirrels are going to alert the deer, even though the deer doesn't see me. The deer knows now that there is some danger in the area, so the deer's white flag is going to go up. The white tail is going to go up, which is why they're called white-tailed deer. Now the white tail goes up, and that alerts the fawns. So now the 2 fawns, the 2 half-grown fawns, know something's up too. None of them have seen me, mind you, but they know something's going on. And this goes on, and the squirrels alert the blue jays, and the blue jays start squawking. You probably have heard blue jays squawking when they raise their alarm call, and they go flying through the woods, and they're sending the signal around, and pretty soon everything is alerted that I'm around, and nobody has seen me yet.
You might as well pack your bag and go home. You're not going to get anything.
Yeah, you got it. So here's where it's so important to realize that most of what's out there is invisible. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's invisible. So if we keep that in mind... So you got to
kind of prepare for all possibilities.
Yes, exactly. And that's something that I'm sure you learned in the Marines too.
Well, not only in the Marines, but even in everyday life. I mean, we learned that the future is unseeable. However, it can be prepared for to a large degree, even though you can't see it if you're willing to look at possibilities.
There you go, yeah. And that's exactly what I was talking about in terms of the continuum. You look at the past, you look at the present, and that takes you right into the future, even though you're not living it yet. You have a pretty good sense of what's going to be going on, and you can prepare.
Yeah, you can at least stack the deck in your favor. And you heard me use that term earlier, but, my kids have heard me use it I don't know how many times in their lifetime. It's something I live by, stacking the deck in my favor.
Beautiful. That's great. That's being proactive rather than reactive. And I wish our us modern people would do more of that. It seems as though we oftentimes don't do something until it hits a crisis state, and then we're all up in arms. And the politicians didn't take care of us, and
And then you have no clue which way to turn.
Exactly.
And you don't know what you're going to do, how you're going to survive. But yet, had you built them wells 20 years ago and planted them gardens, you'd be ready now.
That's right, and we'd be able to help others too, not only just ourselves, but we would be in demand. We'd have really something of value to share with other people.
Then you can get in on the ground floor of something big that nobody else thought about.
That's right. Yeah, you got it, and that's what clever entrepreneurs do in business, actually. Yeah,
that is really what they do, and they exploit it to the highest.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't quit, a lot of them. Some of them are socially responsible and environmentally responsible. Some aren't.
Well, listen, I can do this show for a little longer. It's not important if it overrides. I mean, I host the show myself, so I don't answer to a host stream here. I only answer to one when I'm at Revolution Radio. So that's going to be tomorrow, by the way.
Okay.
What were some of these other things you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I'd like to go over. That would be great. I can spend at least another 10 minutes yet. Then I ought to get going on some other things.
Okay, that's fine. I can work with you. So,
okay,
you said
great.
You had something else you wanted to touch on. You got my curiosity. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. There's another thing that I talk about actually in 2 different stories in the book, and that is about the moving forest. And it's funny because when we walk in the woods, we think, the trees are there, they're solid, they're stationary, they're rooted in the ground, right? Well, that's not the case, because the forest is actually it's a very slow-moving ocean. There are waves that are going through the ocean. When a tree blows down, there's a tip-up. The roots are tipped up, and it ends up rotting down. And that area of open soil that is exposed when the tree tips up is a planting ground where seeds will fall and new trees will start. And if you look at a forest, if you walk into a natural forest, it's not level ground at all. You're going to see all these humps. and it's rolling ground, and that's it. These are all tracks. These are all waves from the old trees that were blown down by the wind and the old trunks that have rotted down. And if you recognize this, you can actually read the forest hundreds of years back. You can tell where the trees stood and when they came down by how old the trees are that grew in their place. And it's just beautiful to see this movement, this wave, this continuum that is constantly going on there, this fluidity. And when we look at nature that way, as everything always moving and always interacting, everything is in relationship with everything else. In the forest, for example, when the trees blow down, they don't just fall over, but they fall over in a certain direction, in the direction that the storm is moving. So you can tell by how many trees fell down and when and in what direction they're placed when this great big hurricane came through, for example, that cleared the woods, and how long ago this hurricane came through. These are the kinds of things that the forest is speaking. You know, the forest is telling its story. So it's not just a bunch of trees. The forest is a dynamic, living environment that's got a history, a story to tell. And once we start tuning into this, it doesn't end. It's the same in the grasslands and in the meadows and the lakes. They're all moving. They're all changing. They all have a life and a death, and they're all going through this. And everything comes alive then. And that's why the native people, you hear them say that everything is alive, everything has life. Well, they show all the aspects of life. You know, they have movement, they have rhythm, they have youth, they have old age, they have death. Everything is a part of this cycle, this hoop of life. And that's the greatest thing that I would like to share with people. And if you do pick up my book, get it from the library or buy it. It doesn't matter to me. Watch for that, because that's a theme that goes through the book. What I was hoping to do in the stories was to help to plant these seeds of life, these seeds of movement. I'm not just talking about nature stories. It's much deeper than that. I'm talking about this native philosophy that permeates all life. That
the respect for all life, respect for elders, even respect for the food you hunt.
Yes, all of that. It just comes naturally when you connect with nature, when you become one with nature again. You wouldn't do anything else, because these creatures are literally your sisters and brothers when you're living with them, when you hear their language and they hear your language and you're moving together. You're dancing the same dance.
Well, I'm curious, when y'all hunt, do y'all hunt all animals, or y'all try to get the ones that are older or more sickly, or in other words, that they still don't have a whole big long life ahead of them, and they've already lived off the better part of their years?
As much as possible, we do a lot of, I'll use fishing as an example. We have a lot of lakes in our area. The town that I live in is 40% water, actually. If it's not a lake, it's a stream or a pond or a bog or a river. There's so much water here. And there are a lot of water animals, beaver, muskrat, ducks, geese, and a lot of fish. And the lakes go through cycles where the northern pike might dominate for a while, and they seem to eat everything up. And there are a lot of big pike, and there aren't too many panfish. And then the pike end up dying back because they don't have any food, and then the panfish end up exploding. The population explodes, and there aren't enough predator fish, not enough muskie and northern pike to eat to keep the population in check. So there's this constant cycle going on. So we're careful with that. If the population of bass is way down in one lake, for example, we'll fish for crappie instead. We'll release the bass so that they can reproduce. And or if there aren't too many snapping turtles are in trouble now, for example, we're not taking any snapping turtles because of that. They're very slow growing, and a lot of them, if they're not hunted, they end up getting hit by cars when they come up on the roadsides to lay their eggs. So we're constantly aware of that and working within that rhythm, and that's just naturally what happens anyway, because predators go for the easiest game, right? So if there aren't a lot of northern pike, you're going to go to a lake somewhere else. If you're not fishing for sport, that is, if you're fishing to feed yourself, you're going to go where you get the biggest bang for your buck, right? So that kind of naturally happens, and we're sensitive to that.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like y'all are very aware of not hunting to extinction. In other words.
Yeah, very much so.
Which, of course, if you did hunt to extinction, you'd just be setting up your own starvation. And that would go into not looking down the road into the future to say, hey, I'm going to need these guys to reproduce for future meals for me and my kids.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Still, look at how many animals we have driven to extinction just in the last 100 years. It's crazy. We just don't realize what we're doing. Well,
they're hunting them to extinction, not even for food. They're doing it for ivory and oil and ink and, corporate America.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think they're going to find out they're going to pay a price for it. They're contaminating the waters. Their oil's getting spilled into the salt waters in more than one location now. There was a nuclear meltdown in China. Who knows where the next one's going to be and when it's going to be. So even if nobody's nuking somebody, their power plants are doing it for them.
Yep, you got it.
And nobody's sitting there saying, you know what, guys, we have solar panel technology. Why don't we get rid of these power plants that are dangerous and sell everybody solar panels and charge them for the upkeep and the maintenance on them, or charge them lease rates or rent rates or something where we can still make our profit, but yet we don't have to worry about the big fallout when something goes wrong.
Yeah, there's vast potential there, tremendous potential.
But nobody gets it.
Oh boy. We have the technology to make biodegradable plastics from cellulose, from wood products right now. We don't need the petroleum. We don't.
Is it as strong as wood products?
I'm not fully up on it. I know it's available. It's expensive right now. Until it catches on, until it gets mass produced, it's going to be expensive. That's the same with anything. And it's all about supply and demand in a capitalist culture. If enough people wanted it, it would happen. We have tremendous technologies. We're running around with a primitive internal combustion engine right now, which is ridiculous because the biggest byproduct of an internal combustion engine is heat, and it gets wasted. Poof. It's all those energy calories.
Well, yeah, and they got hydrogen cars, they got electric cars. And they got a solar electric car, then they could run solar panels on it to power it.
Yeah, there's so much we can do. We've had the same. We're sending people out in space, and we're still running around with the same basic internal combustion engine that was invented 100 years ago. It's ridiculous. It's totally unnecessary.
I would tend to think it's totally unnecessary. It's like somebody just don't want things to change. And they're not going to change it unless and they ain't going to change it unless they ain't got no choice but to change it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then again, you don't have a lot of people that screaming bloody murder yet, so where's the pressure? Where's the motivation?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a term I use around my kids on a daily basis when we're talking about the average American and the government. Where's the motivation to get up and do anything? Because everybody's so compliant. As long as they can go to their movies, they can eat out, they can get on the internet, they can watch their TV. And I'm not against these things. I use them myself. But where does there come a point where you say, well, you know what? I'm not going to have this stuff forever if I don't do something to keep it forever.
Yeah. Well, your kids are lucky to have a daddy like you if these are things you're talking about with them. That's great.
Well, my kids are all above age 19, and they're actually interested in these topics, and it comes up at the dinner table quite a lot.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
These are the discussions we need to be having. That's great.
At least when I pass on, my kids will probably hopefully share it with their kids and keep the ball rolling.
Yeah. It's happening. It's spreading. I see more and more awareness as years go by. I hope it spreads enough to make a difference before it's too late.
Well, sometimes hope's all you got. Don't give up on it, because then you won't have nothing.
Right.
So, Was there any other topics, though, you want to touch on that I don't want to, monopolize the floor from you?
I think that's pretty much it. I think we've covered the important things. I'm just grateful for this opportunity. Anytime that I can share what's dear to my heart and what I think is so important in terms of helping to bring some sanity and some beauty back to our lives again, I take the opportunity, and I'm so glad, Royce, that you invited me to be part of your program. And if ever you want to invite me back again, I'll be glad to come.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Let you know you had an open door here. And do you have anything upcoming that you want to let my listeners know about real quick? Book signings, workshops, new classes, new books, or anything?
Yeah, actually, we have a course in Guardian Warrior training. It's a 80-day at-home course, and it's 80 days in the woods, and it's 160 days altogether. There's an option for taking the first 80 days at home for people who can't come here and spend 80 days in the woods. And you can go to the Teaching Drum Outdoor School website, and there's a link right there on the front page that you can click and go and see what the course is all about. And we have 3 openings yet, so I just thought I'd mention it. They're probably going to fill fast after the word is out. But for people who are interested in evolving their skills of perceptiveness and sensory attunement, and working like a wolf pack, coming together and communicating silently and learning the ways of stealth and invisibility and camouflage, that's what this course is all about. And also learning the language of birds and picking up on the cues of animals, like I spoke about before. Hey, what's the red squirrel saying? Oh, I didn't see something, but the squirrel did. It's all that kind of stuff that we're going to be teaching in this course. And you start it with 80 days at home, and you pick up quite a bit there. And then it's 80 days in the woods if you can do that as well. So you can just go to the Teaching Drum Outdoor School website and find out about it.
I think this is fantastic information for city dwellers and forest dwellers alike. I mean, forest dwellers already know this, but, brush-up courses couldn't hurt anybody. But city folks especially, you don't know how long you're going to have your city, how long we're going to have electricity. Nobody knows what tomorrow holds. This kind of information is something that could keep you alive in an emergency.
Yeah, there you got it. Yeah. I think that's so important. We think about preparing for that time, which we hope is not going to happen, but something's got to pop somewhere. And
I'll tell you what, from my way of thinking, and I'm sorry I interrupted again, but I honestly believe that it's better to learn it and never use it and share it with your kids and your family than it is to not learn it and then unexpectedly need it and wish you had it.
Oh, yeah, that's so important. Yeah. Because then you can rest with some confidence, some self-assurance that you're going to be able to help take care of your kids and your family, and that's so very important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Have a backup plan whether you use it or not. They always say that you'll never need your backup plan as long as you have it. Well, hey, I'll just have it then. It don't matter
that's
to
okay.
me.
Yeah. And one motivation, Royce, that I'd like to mention to your listeners is that when I'm responding to a situation such as, the collapse that may well be coming, I don't like to do it out of fear, because as soon as there's no more fear, for example, if we're turning to solar because we're afraid we're going to run out of oil, what if we come up with a way to manufacture oil? Then we're stuck on oil again. Or we come up with some big new oil reserves, then the pressure is off the solar. We kind of forget about it. Or gas becomes cheap. What if gas is $2 a gallon again? Nobody's going to worry again until it gets up to $3-4 a gallon.
God, I remember when it was $0.25 a gallon.
Yeah, I remember 18 cents actually. It shows how old I am.
Yeah, older than me.
yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't pass that one.
That's okay. That just goes to show. And what I'm really doing is out of love. Even if everything was just perfect in life and there was plenty of oil, I would still want to go solar. I would still want to help take care of the earth. I would still want to be respectable and responsible with hunting and not drive species to extinction. I still want to live in honor and respect. I'm doing it out of love. That's my real motivation.
Yeah, which is a good reason. And, when you help others, you do help yourself because like you said before, everyone and everything is interconnected and, it's a everyone sustaining system sort of.
Yeah, that's it. We're inextricably connected. We're all one.
And I want to thank everybody else for coming to the show tonight. I want to remind you one more time that you can learn more about him at www.tamaracksong.org and at www.teachingdrum.org. And I'd like to invite everybody to join me tomorrow at Evolution Radio at 1 p.m. Central Time. I'm going to be interviewing Ted Peters. This is going to be a 2-hour show. And his book is called UFOs, God's Chariots. And I've been working on his book for quite some time now and haven't got a chance to finish it yet. So hopefully between now and tomorrow I can get at least most of it finished. I have a bad habit of falling asleep before I get a book through because my emphysema don't let me sleep good at night. I end up wheezing and waking up. So I just do what I can when I'm able to. But I'd love to see you people over there. Remember, that's www.freedomslips.com. When you get to the site, look up at the top. You'll see a chat link. Click on it. You'll have a screen come up that'll ask you to choose a background. Pick the one you want. Then a little dialogue will pop up, ask you for a username. You don't have to have a membership. If you want to reserve your username, you do have to give it a password, but you don't have to sign up per se. If you don't care if you have the same username reserved or not, you can just change it every time you get there. But pop in a username, any username will do, and it'll let you into the chat. Once you're in the chat, you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see 3 players. Mine's the one on the far left, Studio A. And then the one in the middle is Nighthawk. He's the one that runs Revolution Radio. And then there's B on the far right, which is the other studio for mostly night shows. I'm on the studio for mostly day shows. So come over there, pop into chat. There's a lot of people there. And enjoy this show. And then don't forget to come back here this coming Saturday at 1 when we talk about the new science of psychedelics with David J. Brown. And I'm going to let y'all go with that, and we're going to call this here a wrap.
To sit in the city for a while to get used to it, and then you start functioning all right. It's the same thing in the woods.
Well, I had to go through survival training in the Marine Corps, and I sometimes don't think a lot of people would that I live with here in the city would take to learning how to survive out in the wild without some kind of training.
Yeah, well, necessity is the mother of invention. If we have, I teach survival courses in the classes we do, and if they think they're coming and they're gonna learn some survival skills and stay here for a week or so and go back home, they don't really apply themselves because they know they're going to have a hot shower at the end of the week. What we need to do in order for them to really get into it is to take away their water bottles, take away their matches, take away their prepackaged food. They all try to sneak some in, and then stick them out in the woods. And now it's do or die. They know they have to get it together. Take away their tarps. We don't even in our year-long course, they don't even get tents. They have to build shelters, and now they start to perform. We have tremendous capacities. We've just pampered ourselves for so long that we don't realize what we're made of and what we're capable of. And I bet you learned that in the Marines too.
Yeah, there is a lot of truth to that, and a lot of people, they just don't want to learn. But again, some of those, even then, when they're put in a do or die situation, they don't like it, but they do it anyway.
True. So true.
But so take it then that you have a big success ratio with your classes.
Well, we have about a 30% dropout rate in the year-long course, and that is, I consider that a tremendous success rate because even in the freshman year of college, there's a 30% dropout rate. You consider that a pretty easy existence. But it's pretty standard for anything where you immerse yourself in another culture. The Peace Corps, the military, even people going to spend a year in an ashram in India have roughly a 30% dropout rate. So we're right in there.
Okay. I'll tell you what, I think there's a lot of people in the city that could probably make use of something like that. I don't know if you get a lot of time to check out the news on TV or Facebook pages or other sources of material that people come across on a daily basis, coming in from most of your conspiracy theorists about how the GMOs are poisoning our food and they got fluoride in the water and I mean all the big doomsday material out there. The thing up front, at least to somebody like me, I mean, you're so worried about survival. You spend such a basic instinct and a need, but yet you turn right around and threaten that survival for your entertainment.
That's right, exactly. You know, we're wired for it. Like you said, even a baby is wired for survival, and that's exactly it. And we don't feel good unless we have some challenge in our lives. And if it's not naturally there, we create it. It's just amazing.
Yeah, from little babies about to fall off the edge of the bed or the stairs to big grown-ups driving 90 miles an hour on an on-ramp and cutting 4 lanes of traffic without looking.
You got it. It's crazy, but that's what we do. Exactly.
I had to throw that one in there because I actually did that one on a dare once.
Oh, boy.
My brother-in-law Jerry never dared me again.
Yeah, good thing.
But you can see why. But you, Tamarack, you live in the wilds, don't you? Or you live on a reservation?
I live in the National Forest, in the Nicolet National Forest up in northern Wisconsin.
So you're not even on a reservation. You're actually in the actual middle of the wild.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you live in a lean-to or a teepee or...
I have one. I don't spend much time there lately, though, because I spend about 2/3 of my time writing and about 1/3 of my time teaching. So I'm looking out the window right now. I'm looking into the forest. So I'm in the forest. However, I am not in a primitive shelter in the forest.
So your cost of living is very, very extremely low.
Extremely low, yes. I heat 100% with wood. I gather all my own meat, fish, all my own nuts, most of my own greens. I do a lot of foraging.
So you would be an excellent person to learn tracking from because you do it as a way of sustenance. I
do, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a way of life. And we talked about being wired for survival. Tracking is a part of the survival skill that's wired in. And you know, the funny thing, Royce, is that we all track. We track all day. To get across town, we're using tracking skills. To keep track of our kids, if we have kids. Finding that set of keys that we set somewhere. We're backtracking ourselves to see where they went. You know, we're always using our tracking skills in some way. And so what I do isn't really all that special. You know, we all like to think we're doing something special, but, you know, I'm just doing what anybody could do. It's just getting used to a new environment. You have to be in the woods for a while in order to get used to it. Just like a country boy, nature is our nature. We cannot escape from it. We breathe the air. We need the water. The trees give us our oxygen. Everything is nature. Even though we say that we live in a civilized environment and nature is out there somewhere, out beyond the city walls or out in the park or in the wilderness or the national forests or whatever. That's not the case. And my mission in life is to help bring that awareness back to our civilized society. And even though we may be leading quite regular lives, if we're aware of this, we might do things a little bit differently. We might buy a little smaller car next time or buy green and start eating organic rather than supporting chemicalizing the fields and all the plants and animals that kills. And it's just basically a matter of awareness, and that's why I wrote the book, and that's my mission in life.
Okay. Well, you know, I was just sitting there listening to you talk about the wilderness out there, and it really kind of slammed home in my mind how many times I've actually heard teachers, parents, preachers, Sunday school teachers, all kinds of people that would actually drive that point home. I mean, to people living inside the city, the nature is out in the woods. Most people, they view themselves as trapped inside of a concrete jungle, but while I was listening to you, the thought also occurred to me, you can't really be trapped fully 100% inside of a concrete jungle without getting rid of all the dogs, the cats, the birds, the trees, the flowers.
Yeah.
it's still intermixed. It's not 100%, in other words, ain't it?
It is truly. And, I teach classes in nature awareness and how to reawaken our senses. They're very deadened, very dulled. 85% of what we do is sight-oriented. But actually sound is much more important than sight in nature. And there's still all of this going on all around us. Even in the concrete jungle, there are pigeons and sparrows, and as you said, there are flowers and there are still trees. Even though there might just be a few ornamental trees, there is life there. And we can attune to that. We can notice that. We can recognize that. In fact, I read about this woman who is everyone knows her just as kind of a regular housewife in the city, in an urban area. However, she is the world expert on house sparrows because she watches the sparrows in her backyard. She knows all about their mating habits and their songs, their communication, their reproductive cycle. She learned all that in her backyard in the city. So it's there.
So she's got a real strong interest in birds, sparrows to be precise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If we learn something about one thing in nature, we learn something about all things, because the same motivations, the same needs, the same desires are shared by all animals. So what you learn about one bird, you know about all birds pretty much.
That's a very good point, because everybody, you, me, even fresh-born babies, at their most basic instinct level, is survival.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we share that with every animal, every part of creation that has any kind of sentience whatsoever. Everybody knows what survival is.
That's a good point. It's a real good point, because what are we all about? We're about surviving and reproducing, and we have to survive in order to reproduce, and we have to reproduce in
reproducing
order to
is about surviving in your generations too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, mm-hmm. That's what it all boils down to. So our discussion right now is about survival.
That kind of makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? Why is the survival instinct so predominant, and why does it occupy so much thought life and everywhere you go, do you think?
Boy, I think about that in relation to our state as civilized humans. We don't think of ourselves as being in survival mode because we're so protected. We don't have, we're protected largely from the weather. We are protected from the day-to-day hunt, going out and hunting animals who could be dangerous. And we live a very, very sheltered existence. However, it's still all about survival, and we're designed as survival creatures. We love stress challenge. If we don't get it, we create it. We go out, we want adventure and excitement and intrigue and mystery, so we watch movies and videos that give it to us. Some of us go out canoeing and skydiving or circuses and fairs and carnivals. There are rides that get our adrenaline pumping, and we go skiing and all kinds of things that give us that rush that we would get on the hunt.
That's kind of a hard to grasp concept if you look at it.
For authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everybody. This is Roy. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce, the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Tamarack Song. And we're going to be talking about his book, Entering the Mind of the Tracker. But before we go into that, if y'all want to learn more about him, he has a website at www.tamaracksong.org and another one at www.teachingdrum.org. And that will have links to his other material and everything you might want to learn about him and get to know him better with. I want to remind everybody that Talk Now Radio is listener supported. So if you want to keep the sponsors out, show your support, purchase books through the links underneath the descriptions. Hit the Google ads at the top. Use the donation meter, whatever. You keep us on the air and keep us from having our shows, I guess you might call it censored, in other words, folks. So whatever you can do to help keep us on the air, we'll keep on going. Tamarack, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Royce, and I'm glad to be here. I so much enjoy talking about this sort of thing. It's spreading the word about nature and the wonders that are just hidden just under the surface that are there for us to discover. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
I am too. I'm looking forward to learning some stuff here. Real quick, want to let everybody know, though, the call-in number is 832-632-7904. And if you don't feel like calling in, feel free to ask your questions in the chat room. So, Tamarack, I was telling you earlier when I first called you that this here's a new topic to me. So I thought you might want to tell everybody what got you involved in writing about this particular topic.
Well, it has to do with the condition of modern man. You might say this is a bit of a simplification, but what it boils down to is that what I see that we've done is we've built up a wall, we've created a boundary between us and nature, and that boundary is rather seamless. Actually, it's a transparent boundary because we are nature.